Chapter 1 of Henry Dunbar. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Henry Dunbar by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Chapter 1. After office hours in the house of Dunbar, Dunbar, and Balderby. The house of Dunbar, Dunbar, and Balderby, East India bankers, was one of the richest firms in the city of London. So rich that it would be quite in vain to endeavour to describe the amount of its wealth. It was something fabulous, people said. The offices were situated in a dingy and narrow thoroughfare leading out of King William Street, and were certainly no great things to look at. But the cellars below their offices, wonderful cellars, that stretched far away underneath the church of St. Gundolph, and were only separated by party walls from the vaults in which the dead lay buried, were popularly supposed to be filled with hogsheads of sovereigns, bars of bullion built up in stacks like so much firewood, and impregnable iron safes crammed to overflowing with bank bills and railway shares, government securities, family jewels, and 100 other trifles of that kind, every one of which was worth a poor man's fortune. The firm of Dunbar had been established very soon after the English first grew powerful in India. It was one of the oldest firms in the city, and the names of Dunbar and Dunbar, painted upon the doorposts and engraved upon shining brass plates on the mahogany doors, had never been expunged or altered, though time and death had done the work of change amongst the owners of that name. The last heads of firm had been two brothers, Hugh and Percival Dunbar, and Percival, the younger of these brothers, had lately died at 80 years of age, leaving his only son, Henry Dunbar, sole inheritor of his enormous wealth. That wealth consisted of a splendid estate in Warwickshire, another estate, scarcely less splendid, in Yorkshire, a noble mansion in Portland Place, and 3/4 of the bank. The junior partner, Mr. Balderby, a good-tempered, middle-aged man, with a large family of daughters, and a handsome red-brick mansion on Clapham Common, had never possessed more than a 4th share in the business. The 3 other shares had been divided between the 2 brothers, and had lapsed entirely into the hands of Percival upon the death of Hugh. On the evening of the 15th of August, 1850, 3 men sat together in one of the shady offices at the back of the banking house in St. Gundolph Lane. These 3 men were Mr. Balderby, a confidential cashier called Clement Austin, and an old clerk, a man of about 65 years of age, who had been a faithful servant of the firm ever since his boyhood. This man's name was Sampson Wilmot. He was old, but he looked much older than he was. His hair was white, and hung in long, thin locks upon the collar of his shabby bottle-green greatcoat. He wore a greatcoat, although it was the height of summer, and most people found the weather insupportably hot. His face was wizen and wrinkled, his faded blue eyes dim and weak-looking. He was feeble, and his hands were tremulous with a perpetual nervous motion. Already he had been stricken twice with paralysis, and he knew that whenever the 3rd stroke came it must be fatal. He was not very much afraid of death, however, for his life had been a joyless one, a monotonous existence of perpetual toil, unrelieved by any home joys or social pleasures. He was not a bad man, for he was honest, conscientious, industrious, and persevering. He lived in a humble lodging in a narrow court near the bank, and went twice every Sunday to the church of St. Gundolph. When he died, he hoped to be buried beneath the flagstones of that city church, and to lie cheek by jowl with the gold in the cellars of the bank. The 3 men were assembled in this gloomy private room after office hours, on a sultry August evening, in order to consult together upon a rather important subject, namely, the reception of Henry Dunbar, the new head of the firm. This Henry Dunbar had been absent from England for 35 years, and no living creature now employed in the bank, except Sampson Wilmot, had ever set eyes upon him. He had sailed for Calcutta 35 years before, and had ever since been employed in the offices of the Indian branch of the bank, first as clerk, afterwards as chief and manager. He had been sent to India because of a great error in which he had committed in his early youth. He had been guilty of forgery. He, or rather an accomplice employed by him, had forged the acceptance of a young nobleman, a brother officer of Henry Dunbar's, and had circulated forged bills of accommodation to the amount of £3,000. These bills were taken up and duly honoured by the heads of the firm. Percival Dunbar gladly paid £3,000 as the price of his son's honour, that which would have been
Sample complete. Ready to continue?